Hi, Knowing You Matter family. You are the graduates, the official first round of graduates from our coaching, teaching, processing group through traumatic grief. So what we're going to do is I'm probably going to stop and start this video a lot because this is my first time. And I want to make sure that I'm getting the important and relevant things said. This first video, I'm actually going to record a huge long video, and then I'm going to go through and log where I break things up. And that way you can skip ahead or go back as you all decide together as a group where you want to go. So the first part is going to be probably the longest and maybe the most boring, but it's basically just going to be a review about what we already talked about. So I'm going to pause it really quick for myself so I can get organized, and then I'm going to come back and I'm just going to very briefly talk about the things that we covered in the 8 weeks that we were together just a short while ago. All right, I'm back. So this isn't going to be in the order that we covered the topics. It's just going to be all of the topics that we covered. So sit back and just listen if you want, or you can skip ahead to the next section, which is where we'll begin the actual first topic for you all to discuss and then to process through together as dyads and then as a whole group. So beginning with, but not limited to, we talked about the stages, phases, and tasks of grief, grieving, and mourning. Stages included denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And that's all pretty familiar because that came from the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross days. And I believe she did that. Well, David Kessler and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And then we talked a little bit about tasks, the tasks of mourning or the tasks of grief. And those included 4 stages. 4 tasks. And by task, we were talking about things that an individual, or this theory was talking about things an individual must overcome while they are working through their grieving process. And that included accepting the reality of the loss, processing the pain and grief, adjusting to the world without their person, and then finding healthy ways to remember while still embarking on the survivor's life. Now, this is not specific to traumatic grief. It's just a theory around a type of working through grief. And this particular researcher called it tasks. And each one of these tasks, for example, accepting the reality of the loss, there's no time limit. Accepting the reality of the loss might include an individual working through this for a year or 2 years or 3 years. So these phases, I keep saying phases, these tasks are not timed. And they're going to happen at different times for each individual, depending on the relationship, who that person was, the depth and breadth of the relationship, and the circumstances of the relationship as well. And circumstances are where our group is special because we are dealing specifically with traumatic grief and traumatic loss. And I'll talk about that in a second. The third grouping of grief processing was called phases. So we talked about stages. That's the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler piece. And then we have the tasks. And now we have phases. And phases came from a guy, last name is Rando. It's not really important to you, but it helps me remember because he called it the 6 R's. And I don't know how deeply we covered this or even how briefly, but they include the following: recognizing the loss, which you can hear is similar to the tasks concept, reacting to the separation, remembering and re-experiencing, and this is going to be important for that trauma piece, and then relinquishing toxic attachments and assumptions. So I added toxic because that's actually not embedded in the theory, but because we're talking about traumatic grief specifically, I think it's important that we address the idea that, and we covered this a little bit, the toxic versus authentic, and I'll get back to that. So relinquishing toxic attachments and assumptions, and then readjusting to the new world, and finally reinvestment. We barely touched on reinvestment in our group. We're going to touch on it a little bit more in this 12-part work that we're going to do. This first video isn't going to have all of those subsequent tasks involved, but we are going to address them to a certain extent. All right, so other goodies that we discussed were boundaries, when to set them, how to set them, what they look like, when they're healthy, when they're not healthy. We talked about a little bit about what's happening in the brain with regard to cortisol levels and what happens when we have, for example, a grief burst where everything's great. We've had several days, weeks, or months where everything's fine and dandy. We're doing okay. We think we've got this traumatic grief thing down pat. And then all of a sudden we're on our knees in the fetal position in the kitchen, sobbing. We talked about the difference between campsites and rest stops when we are processing memories, when we're processing. And when I say processing, I'm talking about when we're thinking, we're recalling, we're remembering certain events. They're going to be fractured memories. The way that trauma works is that the memories are not held in the same place that a normal memory, like when you got married or when you won a special award, the life with your spouse or partner, or special person, it's like those are all kind of chronological memories, but traumatic memories are stored in different places, and we call them fractured memories. So that's when we have the conversation around campsites versus rest stops. We can also talk about campsites versus rest stops in the context of toxic grief, where we're grabbing the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, or we're grabbing, if I had just, stayed on the phone this much longer, or sent this text message, or paid more attention to, or fill in the blank. That's the toxic grief space. And that's where we want to decide, okay, is this going to be a campsite? Am I going to camp out here? Or is this going to be a rest stop? We also discussed breathing and grounding, and I'm going to do that 4 square breathing and 4 count breathing on this particular video, so that, and I'll tell you what, minutes where you can go to get there if you want to do that during one of your meetings. And then we had a conversation around continuing bond and living legacy. A continuing bond is where we make a decision about how we're going to remember that person in our life. And sometimes that could mean doing certain ceremonies. It could be certain rituals. It could be certain anniversaries. It could be, I have my husband's watch in the drawer next to my bed. I have his favorite baseball cap. You can't see it, but it's right here behind me. Different things that we have. I know some people put their loved ones' artwork, or they frame letters. They send off balloons. They celebrate birthdays, certain anniversaries, and different things like that. That is continuing bond. Some people journal to their person. And then the living legacy is, how do we want our person to be remembered? Are we going to hold this person accountable to the one decision they made, as opposed to the millions they made in their life? And is their legacy going to be one of trauma? Is their legacy going to be one of death by suicide? Or is it going to be, it's going to be all the beauty. It's going to be all the wonderful things, all of the lovely things about our person, all of the other millions of decisions that were good that this person made. Is that going to be the legacy? So these are decisions that you'll have to make as you move forward. I know you also, I know that you've what you've already decided, but in the meantime, there are things that you can be sharing with others who are suffering as well, maybe who are new or more early in their journey. Moving on, we talked about the differences between mourning, grief, and bereavement. So mourning, if you recall, is the outward expression of sadness and grief, where bereavement is the inward experience. So mourning could be considered a funeral or last rites. It could be the Wailing Wall in Israel. That would be an outward expression. And then there is grief, and grief is, when I discuss it with students where I teach, I discuss it as depth and breadth. So grief is forever. Grief is the thing that we say we never get over. Grief is the thing that we say, I'm never going to get past this. It's not that I'm not going to get past it. It's, I'm never going to stop. The pain's never going to stop, but the pain will shapeshift. The pain will come in degrees and variations. And so I try to talk about that, grief specifically, in the space of missing and longing versus pining and despairing. And pining and despairing are similar. Pining is the it's associated with the toxic grief, because you're never going to get your person back. So spending time in that space, and that, making it a campsite, that's what can turn in very quickly. That's what can turn into toxic grief. Despairing is what leads to hopelessness. Okay. So again, getting into that toxic space, whereas missing and longing for our person, that's not ever going to go away. We're always going to wish our person was alive. But when we enter into a space of acceptance, that longing becomes more authentic, as opposed to the longing becoming shifting into despairing. And of course, missing, we miss them forever. That doesn't change. I think that's everything. So I am going to move on to talking with you about what each of these sessions are going to look like. So I'm going to start off. I'm going to offer a 10-minute discussion point, something for you all to talk about. And then you're going to break off into, or you're going to journal. And then you're going to break off into dyads. So you and a partner, you're going to go off. Sometimes it'll be groups of 3 if there's odd numbers. And you're going to go off and you're going to process, you're going to discuss the topic. And then you're going to come back as a group and you're going to share. Whoever wants to share will have the opportunity to share. The way that this should work is I talk for 10-ish minutes. Then you go off and you do your sharing in your small groups. And each person, if it's a group of 3, you're going to have maybe 10 to 12 minutes. Groups of 2 will have closer to 15 minutes. So, 15 to 20 minutes. So when you break off into your dyads and triads, you want to commit maybe 40 minutes of your time. That's where the support is really going to come into play, where you're going to listen, you're going to hear, you're not going to crosstalk, you're not going to critique, you're not going to offer advice. This is the time where your person in front of you is going to have the opportunity to share and process. And then you'll all come back and you all will then have the opportunity to decide how much time do we want to spend in the whole group processing. One way to keep it succinct but also powerful is to discuss, okay, once everybody comes back into the larger group, you take another opportunity to journal what were your takeaways from your dyad and triad, and then whomever wishes to share at that point will have the opportunity to share. If you keep your sharing between 2 to 3 minutes, it shouldn't take too much time, but again, that's a norm that you will have to discuss as your group. All right, so that's pretty much the introduction of our getting back together, our reunion, and moving forward into this processing group graduation. So I'm going to pause, and then I'm going to go ahead and jump into our next lesson. So right now, if you would like to grab a pen and paper, and then once everybody is settled, go ahead and hit play again, and we'll get to it. Lesson 1. All right, here we go. Let me find out where to stop. There we go. Okay, pausing now. All right, hello and welcome back. Hopefully everyone has a pen and paper or something to write with, maybe a notebook. We're going to be working out of this book again, or still, this is the Post-Traumatic Growth Guidebook. This is the one that we used a couple of different times in our time together. I'm going to be starting on page 95. The author is Arielle Scwhartz. So chapter 3, page 95 talks about transformation and really exploring your ability to tolerate uncomfortable situations, emotions, feelings, and sensations that are happening inside your body. And so I don't know if you recall or not, but we worked on the breathing grounding exercises prior to jumping into some discussions, because certain weeks, some people just seemed extra tired and some people seemed hyper aroused or stressed. So what we're going to do right now is, before we jump in, hit the ground running on page 95, I want to go ahead and include that 4-count breathing exercise right now. So go ahead and get comfortable. And I'm going to stop my video, but I'm going to keep the volume up so you can hear me, but also so that I don't appear to be a distraction. And we are going to engage in the 4-count breathing exercise. All right, I want everyone to get comfortable. Better if your feet are on the ground. I want you to relax your shoulders. Some of you may want your hands in your lap. Some of you may want your hands crossed. Maybe some of you want your hands to the sides. But everybody needs to close their eyes and just take in a good, deep cleansing breath. Just breathe in as deeply as you can, and then just let it go. And remember, every time you breathe in, to really feel the air filling your lungs. And every time you exhale, I really want you to be releasing tension. Sometimes that looks like literally envisioning tension leaving your body. And sometimes it just looks like envisioning the air leaving your body. Whatever is going to work best for you visually in your mind's eye, I want you to go with that. Before we do the 4-count breathing, I'm going to walk you through a full systems check. We're going to start at the very top of our heads, and we're going to come all the way down to the bottom of our feet. And as you do this internal mind's eye body scan, I really want you focusing on the microscopic detail of your body. I want you looking at your skin. I want you looking at hair follicles. I want you looking at the ridges in your fingernails. I want you looking at your eyelashes, the striations in your eyes, your teeth, the crevices and wrinkles in your lip, your laugh lines, all of these things. I want you really, really focusing on your body. In trauma, we ignore our bodies. When we are processing through and moving through the grief experience, it is more comfortable for us to ignore our bodies than to focus on our bodies. We detach because our bodies hurt. Our bodies want to hold our person, and that's painful. We feel that physically. And so one way we cope is by ignoring our body and bodily sensations. So we will get into that more in the chapter, but for right now, as we work on this, this meditative process of releasing and relinquishing tension and stress and toxicity, it's really important that you pay close attention to what's going on with your body. In other words, is there a knot in your throat? Is there heaviness in your chest? Is there knots in your shoulders? Is there a sharp back pain or a dull back pain? What about your GI tract? What about your stomach? Are there knots in your stomach? Are there butterflies? Is there burning? Is there tension in your calves and your backside? Is there tension around your knees or pain in your knees? How about your finger joints? What are your eyes doing? Is there stress around the temples of your eye? Is your jaw tight? So as we do the systems check, I really want you exploring what's going on with your body. So we're going to start. So right now, I want everybody to just start at the very top of your head. And I want you to look at the color of your skin on your scalp on the top of your head. And I want you to look even closer to the hairs. And I want you to look at those hair follicles, those hair shafts. We're going to come down, and you decide. Come down your forehead, come down the back of your head, but I want you to take your mind's eye. I want you to come all the way down. And I want you looking for tension. Are you holding tension in the back of your head? Are you holding tension in your forehead? What about your eyebrows? Your temples? Come down to your eyes, your nose, your cheeks, your nostrils, your mouth, ears, jawbone. What's your mouth doing? What's your tongue doing? Where is it sitting? Is it sitting in the top of your mouth? Are you clenching your teeth? Are you clenching your jaws? What are your lips doing? Come down the back of your neck, your throat, your shoulders, your clavicle, shoulder blades, Release tension. You sit there, feel the gravity of the earth just pulling you in. Let your body become heavy. Let your body become limp. Scan your chest, upper back, and upper arms. You holding any tension there. With every breath you exhale, just release. Just let it go. Come down to your elbows, the center of your core, your lower arms, abdominal area, mid and lower back. And just release tension as you go. Come down to your hands and wiggle those fingers. Come down to your backside, your quads, hamstrings. Release tension as you go. Scan your knees, your shins, your calves. Every time you exhale, I want you releasing more tension. Breathing in, exhaling. Your mind's eye, look at your ankles, the top of your feet and the bottom. Release. Your body should be nice and relaxed, feeling the earth pulling you in, giving you a hug of sorts, reminding you that you're alive and it's a good life. Okay, we're going to start our 4-count breathing. The terms I'm going to use are going to be breathe in, hold, release, and hold. Each time I say something, it's going to be a 4-count. Remember that when you breathe in, you're holding it. You're breathing in for 4 counts. And then when you hold it, you're going to hold it. You're not going to breathe in or out for 4 counts. And then you're going to release, and that's when you're going to exhale your breath. You're going to exhale for 4 counts. And then once again, you're going to hold it for 4 counts. And we're going to do this 3 or 4 times. All right, here we go. Get nice and relaxed. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Now hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Release. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Release. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Release. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Release. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Relax. And as you are comfortable, as you begin to feel more comfortable, go ahead and come on back into the room. And we're going to start our quick lesson, our first lesson. And I might end this video here, and then the next video will be continued lessons for discussion. All right. You can go ahead and stop me, pause me, and let everybody kind of get comfortable and resituated. All right. Chapter 3 of our Post-Traumatic Growth Guidebook. So chapter 3 begins with learning how to understand when you are in a hyper aroused and hypo aroused state. When you're antsy, you're hyper aroused, and when you're feeling really down in the dumps, you're hypo aroused. And the whole point of this particular section is to learn where you are. What is they call it the window of tolerance. So where is your window of tolerance? And then the goal is to expand that window of tolerance so that you can function more efficiently in the world after you've experienced a trauma. So what I'm going to have you do is read pages 95 through 97. So hopefully you've already done that. And then after you get through pages 95 through 97, you're going to actually do the activity. It's activity 31 on page 98, where you're exploring your window of tolerance. And that's going to be really a lot of what we just did, getting inside your body and looking and seeing where you're holding stress. I'm going to pause really quick and I'll be right back. All right. So as you explore these few pages, so again, those are pages, I believe, 95 through 98, I want you thinking about certain things in your own life. How much sleep are you getting? How much time are you spending taking care of your body? Are you eating nutritious food? Are you getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep? What is the quality of your sleep? What are you spending time thinking about? Who are you allowing yourself to spend time with? Are your thoughts leaning more towards toxicity, or are your thoughts leaning more towards health? Who is your support system? And how do all of those things create energy in your body? Do they create good energy or do they create negative energy? I'm not getting new age here. I just want you really thinking about, am I living a life that's adding toxicity to my body, or am I leading a life that's adding health to my body? When you are recovering from trauma, it is very important that you consider how well you are taking care of your body, because you will not be set up for healthy grief if you are not taking care of the basics. This could include oral hygiene. It could include how often you're showering. It could include what television programs you're watching, what music you're listening to. So after you've read pages 95 to 97, and hopefully you have, I want you to explore page 98. And so this is the patterning of these little modules, right? So we've done the explanation. We've had a conversation around, what's important and how to take care of your body, and whether or not you are taking care of your body. These are just food for discussion, really, and things for you to think about. And we've discussed very briefly hyperarousal and hypoarousal. Hyperarousal, super agitated, antsy, irritable, just in a funk, in a bad mood. And then we have hypoarousal, which is more lethargy, more depressive. And as you focus on 98, the activity on 98, I want you to be thinking about those things. How are you taking care of your body? And she uses the language of rhythms, but how are you experiencing your body in the day-to-day? So read those few pages. Then I want you to take private time right now in your journal on your piece of paper, and I want you to respond to page 98. Really think about the questions on page 98. And for those of you who don't want to write stuff down, that's fine. Maybe just do bullet points so that you can add to the conversation when you're in your dyad or triad. Once you're finished writing down, brainstorming basically from page 98, then I want you to break off into your dyads and triads and go do sharing time and processing time with your partners. Take about 15 to 20 minutes each, depending on the size of your dyad or triad, and then come back and discuss what you are taking away from that time of discussion with the whole group. All right, so that ends this first module. Hopefully it goes all right, and I'm looking forward to hearing the feedback. Take good care. Bye, everybody.